wasallam, and which was a core principle of the Sahaba's habit. And that is it'amul ta'am, feeding other people. The Sahaba have had a very big culture of feeding other people. And that's also a very big culture for people back at home. So if you are growing up, especially overseas, you know that feeding other people, feeding your neighbor is something that's very, very common. Especially if you have Muslim neighbors, right? And even if you have non-Muslim neighbors, you should be doing this. And that is why, if you notice, on a tangent, the Zabiha and non-Zabiha issue is a big deal for Desis and not Arabs. And there is actually a cultural reason for this. Because Desis, their neighbors were generally Hindus, who were either vegetarian or they were polytheists. So there was no question about eating their meat. But whereas in the Arab world, the neighbors were generally Christian or Jews. You don't really have atheist neighbors or polytheist or mushrik neighbors, so you're very comfortable eating your neighbor's food, right? Their meat and whatever is being cooked over there. The difference happens when you come to America, and now the question is McDonald's meat from people of the book or not? The answer is, it's a Zionist organization, so it doesn't matter. This one. Non-Z also means non? Actually, that becomes the Zionist organization. Oh, but you support your brothers and sisters who have restaurants around here. You know, it's a hard life. It's a hard earning. But culturally, you have this phenomenon where people are always feeding their neighbors. How many of us over here have Muslim neighbors? Over there. Some of you guys have Muslim neighbors. Do you guys ever just like, you know, we're short on onions. Do you have onions in your house? We're short on tomatoes. No, you guys don't do this?
We always give each other dishes. You know?
Dishes, but not like supplies.
Yeah, they don't ask for, you know.
Supplies. No, but our neighbors are Muslim back in New Jersey, and it would be common to be like, okay, if you're out of, and then plus my sister-in-law and brother, they live a couple of minutes away from my parents, so it's, you know, you find it's very common that, okay, we're low on onions. Do you have onions? Do you have some sugar? Do you have this? And people would have this type of trade between each other, and there is this right that neighbors have, right? And Rasulullah taught, food brings people together like nothing else does for a few reasons. Number one is your risk is written. If your risk is written somewhere, you can't avoid it. I had, not too long ago, I had a flight booked, issued, everything, and I always usually fly Turkish Airlines, and subhanAllah, some last minute changes happened. I had to fly through France. And I haven't been to Paris in years. But my risk was written to eat a croissant and a macaron there. So it pulled me there, and I had to be there forward. So your risk pulls you in places that it's unimaginable that you'll end up being there. So risk is powerful is because not only is your risk written, but the fact that you will eat together is written as well. And the Prophet ﷺ talks about eating together. And you can eat together in two ways. One is eating from the same plate. The other, my teacher's opinion, was that when the Prophet ﷺ spoke about eating together, he wasn't talking about eating in one plate necessarily. He said also people coming together like you guys are all eating here is also part of eating together. And his view was that somebody may want some more of a curry and someone with less rice and dish and so on. But I think the spirit of eating in one plate has its own barakah to it. The Prophet ﷺ, when he says that, when we grew up, my childhood is actually very interesting. Though I was born in Dallas, I grew up in Jeddah till I was 5-6 years old. And we had this small apartment, which is probably, I think, maybe 2 or 3 bedrooms. And in that apartment, you had about 3-4 families that stayed. So all the kids and everyone, you'd have like 8-10 kids. And then my mom would take a plate of food and she'd mix it up and she'd feed all the 8-10 kids at one time growing up. And though that happened such a long time ago, all of us still have that fond memory the barakah of that food and eating as a family together. The Prophet ﷺ said that one of the sadaqah and the charities is to feed your spouse, to give them something to eat with your hand, right? So to feed your spouse, and that's a sunnah to practice. So if you are married, today, go practice that sunnah. It's sadaqah, it's charity, it's free, unless the meal is expensive. Then it's a little more expensive than that. But this is from sadaqah to the Prophet hatta luqma, up until the morsel you input in the mouth of your spouse. So one thing is eating in the same sahan, eating in the same plate. When we were studying in madrasa, you have about 1,000 kids. They have to have lunch, and you need to serve them like ASAP, right? So how are you going to serve 1,000 people food? So they would have these things called kunchas. Kuncha is basically a big sahan, and it would be massive. It would be about this big, right? And 3 to 4 people would eat from it. So they just now, instead of having to serve 1,000 people, you have to serve 250 plates, which is still a massive amount, which you have to do within 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, because students to come, eat, and leave, right? They don't have, you guys have buffets, and you guys have these type of things where people can come in line and school and all that. By us, it's a very different scenario. So you'd have multiple people. We grew up eating with one another, right? Eating from the same plate. And when you have that dynamic, you develop a quality of giving preference to someone else. Because there's going to be undoubtedly pieces of meat that now you have to decide. That is this mine, or am I going to give it up to someone else? So there was this one person, the 4 people that they sat together, and there was a big plate of rice, and there was only a little curry, right? And so there was 4 people sitting down, or 3 people sitting down, and the first guy, he realizes that the curry's so far ahead that, that once people put their hand in and there's just a little bit of meat, I'm not going to get any. So he goes and he takes his finger and he says that there's a river that is close to my home, and it's called the river of whatever it was called. He said, and it went straight to my home. So he drew a line through the rice, and the curry started flowing through. And he's like, okay, this meat will then, as it's flying, then it doesn't look bad that I'm reaching forward, right? And the meat will come. And the second guy goes like, in my hometown, he's like, we have a river, and it's called, the Jefferson River, and it goes straight to my town, to my house as well. And he draws a line. The third guy's like, oh my God, the curry is spilling. He's like, what do you call, this is a problem because I'm not going to get anything. So then he says, in my home, he said, we don't have any rivers, but a tsunami came and it hit my home. But eating in a plate, all jokes aside, it creates a level of barakah, right? One of the etiquettes of eating together is to not count the food. So I know sometimes it happens in Ramadan, especially when you're younger. You see 8 samosas, and you already start becoming a mathematician, right? How many people, this, that, especially if the samosas aren't even, then you're like, okay, who's gonna get what? But the ithar as a preference is always, you want to be the person that gives that food to the other person, right? When I was, my brother, I don't know how true he is, or he was just capping with me when he said this to me. He told me years later, he was like, Wasim, he's like, my entire life, he's like, I really enjoyed the thigh piece of a chicken. He's like, but I always gave it up because I knew you'd like it. And I was like, I like the leg piece. You were giving up the wrong thing this whole time. But anyway, the point is ithar, right? وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ. And this quality of the Ansar, and we're going to go through some stories of the Sahaba of how they did this. To give preference to someone else, to eat, to share your wealth with other people. This is another thing that I think immigrant parents don't get enough credit for. And we actually forget, and I can't recall if anyone's ever mentions this. But immigrant parents, and a lot of you who came from India, Pakistan, or a different country, Egypt, Palestine, you usually housed another family member until they got on their feet. And then they went, elsewhere, and now they've lived a life, and they've, mashallah. We also, when we first came to America, we stayed at, may Allah have mercy on my aunt's soul. We stayed at our home for a few months until we were able to kind of live. And this is part of what the Sahaba did. The Sahaba, this culture of having people in our homes, which I think our younger generation is very different about it than our parent generation. Our parent generation is very accustomed to inviting people over the house, having a meal, and guests staying in the house. Growing up, we had, I remember we used to live in this apartment, it was a townhome, it was really nice, and we had 3 bedrooms. And one bedroom was my parents, one bedroom all 3 siblings slept in, and one bedroom was exclusive for the guests. Then, when times became difficult, we moved into this other apartment, and it was a 2-bedroom apartment with a basement. So now one bedroom was the parents' bedroom, one was the guest bedroom, and the kids slept in the basement. And then when we moved on into a house, then my father built out the whole basement exclusively for guests. So they have their bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, laundry machine, everything exclusively for the guests. There was a hadith we were doing this week in Mukhtasar Maqasid al-Hasana, that the Prophet ﷺ said that the guest comes with their own risk. The guest brings their sustenance. He's not referring to a potluck or a one-dish party. The guest brings their own risk and leaves with the sins or the forgiveness of the people. You get forgiveness for inviting a guest. And think about it logically. Normally, when a guest comes, you make all of these new dishes, right? Otherwise, you're eating the same dal shawal, adas, warming it up for 4 days in a row. But when the guest comes and all these new dishes, new cutlery comes out, fancier things happen, the house gets even more clean. So a guest brings a lot of barakah. And the life of the Sahaba was very much, especially in Medina, was very much guest-oriented. Even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, where is the first Islamic institute? What's the place called? Darul Arqam. Arqam ibn Abil Arqam is a Sahabi's name. Darul Arqam isn't an institute. This is the house of a Sahabi who opens it up and says, I want my house to be the first center of knowledge. And many masjids in America, their legacy began with somebody's basement, with someone's garage, with someone's living room, right? And then it turns into this. So opening your house for these type of events. When I was in Houston, it was very interesting. The first majlises that took place, they actually took place in one of my friends, Dr. Arsalat, now he's a Hafiz of the Quran too, his home. And it was a small apartment. It had a living room and it had 2 bedrooms. And I think one bedroom was like a guest bedroom. So the living room, the men would sit, and in the guest bedroom, the sisters would sit. And then everybody would bring one dish, and we'd have food every, I think it was a Thursday or something. But that was, it started from someone's house. Now that we're sitting in a musalla and a masjid, but it started from someone's house. So there is an intrinsic barakah. Now, you may have a problem where you're like, my parents may not allow it. They don't want people to come over. Think about it when you have your house. That my house should be an abode for the guests. The Arabs would generally say that they would call a person who was very gracious and had a lot of guests. They would title him with something. Does anyone know what they would title him with? Kathirul Ramad. What does Ramad mean? Ashes. So why would they call someone with a lot of ashes? Because it is. Huh?
Stove is always on.
He's cooking all the time, right? So you need firewood, and firewood turns into ashes. So this person is cooking all the time. Hatib Ba'i was known as this very generous person who would always have a pot running. And our masjids, for some reason in America, we haven't adopted this culture. But if you go to the Hindu mandir or the Sikh gurdwara, they have something called langar. You ever heard of langar? What's langar? There's always food. There's always a pot there. Not pot. That's a different place. But there's always food that's on the stove there. And having these food kitchens, and I think while our masjids are building so many new things, and we have these mega masjids, I think it's a part of our deen that we don't do enough. That we don't feed people. We have, these food pantries once a week where people will come and will distribute, and that's good, right? But there's a certain barakah, and there's a certain discipline in people cooking hot food and leaving it or going and serving people and creating that culture. And inshallah, hopefully by us, one of the volunteers will come up and say, I want to take charge of this mission. We have a beautiful black stone griddle. They can at least start to cook and serve the people, right? But this is it'am al-ta'am, is part of our faith. I'm going to go through some of the stories of how the Muhajirin and the Ansar, they dealt with each other. And one of them is very famous. When the Prophet ﷺ arrives in Medina, he starts making family units. It's called mu'akhat. And the word is very beautiful. He starts making families out of people, right? So he takes two Sahabas and he pairs them together. He takes a migrating Sahaba, who's known as a Muhajir, and an Ansari Sahaba, and he says, now you guys are going to live together, right? Until this person can get on their feet. Now think about it. What were the Muhajirin by nature? They were, by nature, what were they? Huh? But what were they by nature? What profession did they have? They were businessmen. And by profession, what were the Ansar? Farmers. Okay, now think about this. Think about it. The farmer has a lot of land. You can't be farming on like a small piece of land. A lot of land. And building a structure back in the day, people could just cut wood off and they can do that. There's forests around, there's trees around. It's not as difficult, right? On a piece of land. These are not like government proctor lands. You can always build something outside, in the outskirts, right? In the city area is all taken over. This is the year 600, so 610. So you can really just take a piece of land and own it. There's no governance that says this is the government's land. Are you following? And the Muhajirin, they're businessmen. But not a single Muhajir builds a hotel. And not a single Ansar says, well, I have 5 acres, or I have 3 acres. I'm going to build you your own house. You don't stay in my house. It doesn't happen. If it was you and I, we'd be like, how can we make money? They wanted the Muhajirin Sahaba in their homes. And the Sahaba's homes were very tiny. The size of our living rooms is generally the size of their homes. So when you have people with families and things, you have to really put yourself in those shoes. You're hearing conversations, you're hearing intimate moments, you're hearing discussions, you're hearing children grow up, you're hearing food being cooked. It's a whole ecosystem that's taking place there. This is not just being like, oh, the Sahabi was living with the Sahabi. This was more advanced. You're literally bored. Has anyone over here been to boarding school? Been to boarding school? Yeah. Africa? India? Pakistan? Did you go to madrasa?
No, I was low key.
Madrasa?
No. Regular school.
Regular school. Madrasas aren't regular school, right?
No, well,
Okay, I get it. But when you're living in boarding schools, I grew up in a boarding school, so it's very common to kind of just live with people of different backgrounds. 6 people in a room, right? Astaghfirullah, we shouldn't say this. But there's one of the madrasas I went to, there was a big room. There'd be like 12 people in that room. All the other rooms had like 2, 3, 2, 3, 2. This one room, for some reason, didn't have a wall, 12 people inside. And usually speaking, it would be the room that when students first came in, before they got allotted, they kind of put them in that room, and then after that, shut the room. So that room was called the refugee camp, because everybody was kind of put in there first, and then that became. I think that room 10 years later still called it refugee camp. Like it's notorious for its name. But you have this cross intersection of people's lives. So when the Prophet ﷺ comes to Medina, he tells Abdul Rahman ibn Auf radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, Sa'd ibn Rabi' radiallahu anhu. So there's a lot of Sa'ds in history. You have Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, you have Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, and you have this Sa'd ibn Rabi'. And Sa'd ibn Rabi', he tells him, he says, okay, you two are brothers now. And Sa'd ibn Rabi' is one of the wealthy people. So Sa'd ibn Rabi' goes like, man, I have 2 houses. He says, you pick which one you like, and it's yours. He's like, I have 2 businesses, two gardens. Pick which one you like, and it's yours. He's not giving portions. He's giving full off, a full garden. And he's not saying, here, take this. Now, there's another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the Ansar would actually, when they would harvest, they would make 2 piles from their harvest. They would make 1 pile which would have slightly more in it, and 1 pile which would have slightly less in it. And then they would take those piles and present it in front of their Muhajirin brothers. And they would say, pick which one you want. And the Ansari Sahabi said the Muhajirin would always take the one that had the more in it. And they would be happy taking the less. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, even if it caused them difficulty and respect. Right? They give more. So anyway, Sa'd ibn Rabi' says, well, I have 2 gardens. Pick which one you want, and it's yours. And he says, I have 2 wives. Now, he's an early convert, right? That's why he's saying this. Otherwise, you're like, first of all, why does he have 2 wives? Why is he just being like, oh, you can take one of them? His Islam is new. So he's all in Josh. He's all like excited. He's like, I got 2 wives, man. You look like a single brother. He's like, go and pick which one you want. Like, the houses is okay. The gardens, the wives, struggle is real, brother. No. He says, Jazakallah khair, show me where the market is. Show me where the market is. And he says, Ghafarallahu lak. He says, may Allah forgive you. He says, may Allah bless you. Barakallahu lak. He says, show me where the market is. And Sa'd says, Lelo. I said, Dene wale nahi. He says, man, take it. You're not going to find people who give like this. He said, Chhod do. I said, Tukrane wale bhi nahi. He said, forget it. You also won't find people who reject like this. He's like, you won't find people who say no like this either. He said, you won't find people who give. He said, yeah, you also won't find people who say no like this. And it's interesting, Abdurrahman bin Auf radiallahu anhu, he becomes one of the wealthiest Sahaba. And how does he do it? He takes a loan of a camel. He starts off with 1 loan. And that's his only loan, and then he never takes loans again. He starts off with 1 camel. And he says, he takes a camel, and he takes a loan of the camel, and then he goes to sell the camel. Now when he goes to sell the camel, you need a rope to pull the camel, right? So he would sell the camel without the rope. It's the whole story of like, sell me this pen, right? But Ibn Auf was a master at it. So buy the camel, you'd have it with the rope, because that was, the norm. And then he would sell the camel without the rope and say, here's a little bit, this for a little more, you can get this rope to get the camel. And he kept on flipping camels until he had enough money from the ropes to pay back the capital and buy another camel. Then he bought multiple camels, and he expanded his business like this to the point that he had so much that the Prophet ﷺ said, Ibn Auf, you will be the last Sahabi to enter Jannah. And he had a massive caravan, that when the caravan of Abdurrahman ibn Auf would enter Medina, the people of Medina would think there was an impending attack. And they would say, no, this is just the caravan of Ibn Auf that's pulling up. And massive camels, loaded. If each camel's worth $3,000-$4,000, easy, he's got a few hundred. That's the worth of the camel. Imagine the merchandise on top. They would say that Ibn Auf's hands, they would call him, so to say in Arabic, King Midas. That if he touched stones, it would turn into gold, metaphorically. That he could sell anything. They say in Urdu, Ganji ko Ganji bechna. That he could sell a comb to a bald man. Right? What's a bald man going to do with the comb? He can't use it. Maybe his eyebrows or something.
Beard.
Yeah, if he has a beard. But usually in our place, just eyebrows. That's it. Right? but he sells, you know, and he was really good at it. And the Prophet ﷺ tells him, he says, Jibreel, he says, Abdurrahman, Jibreel just told me, and he's got this massive caravan. So Jibreel just told me that you're the last one to enter Jannah. He says, yeah, so what did I do? He said, by the time your accounting is done, everybody else would have already entered Jannah. From the Sahaba. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I give my entire wealth into sadaqah. And the Prophet said, Jibreel has just come back and said, no, no, no. He said, give half and reinvest it. Right? Like, give half in sadaqah, reinvest your other half, so you can do more khair. You know, true success is not that you should want to be a doctor, engineer, lawyer, cybersecurity, whatever profession it is. The goal shouldn't be to make money, the goal should be to give money. You shouldn't enter these professions because I can make more. You should go into these professions that I can give more. And that is true success. That's barakah in your wealth. So Abdurrahman ibn Auf, he continues flipping this, and he eventually does get married in Medina. The Prophet sees him one day, and he's got like makeup all over him. Did I mention this story recently? No? I should have mentioned this somewhere else. So he's got makeup all over him, right? Like, you know, Rahman. These little marks and stuff. What's going on? He says, oh, Ya Rasulullah, I got married. Now, on a side note, he's in Medina, and he didn't invite the Prophet ﷺ to his nikah. Imagine if someone didn't invite us to their nikah. Oh, we don't want to talk to you anymore. We're not. I know so many people in the communities. I once performed a nikah somewhere, and I get this message from a brother. You have broken the family. And I was like, my God, the nikah's gone already. I was like, what's tonight? I was like, alhamdulillah, usually the ones that perform are a little bit long lasting. And I called, I was like, what happened? He was like, they did not make me a witness, they made another person a witness, therefore now I'm not going to their wedding invitation, and the whole family's broken. I said, because they didn't make you a witness? I said, but I saw you at the nikah. He said, but my name's not on the certificate. And they said, you didn't. And I said, Ya Rab, I said, the certificate is bid'ah. The Sahaba didn't read or write. I said, what difference does it make? But no, and these are real stories. The people are not talking to each other now. And now they don't, and you have these problems. People don't invite. And people get upset. They didn't invite us to their wedding. They got married and these things. But Abdurrahman ibn Auf is getting married in Medina. Doesn't call the Prophet ﷺ to perform his nikah. Doesn't say anything. And he just shows up. And then the Prophet ﷺ goes to him, he's like, yo, did you do a walima? And he's like, oh no. The Prophet ﷺ says, awlim walau bishatin. Do a walima even if it's with just one goat. And the scholars say that this could be translated in two different ways. It could be translated by saying, hey man, do the walima, even if it's just a goat, even if it's something small. Or it could mean, because it has a dual meaning. Do a walima, even if you have to slaughter a goat. So it could be reflective of doing a small walima or a grandeur of a walima. So the whole narration of walima and doing a walima comes from Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu, who didn't invite the Prophet ﷺ to his own nikah. And God knows if he invited him to the walima or not. And the Prophet ﷺ actually says that the worst food is the food of the walima. First of all, if someone invites you to a walima, you have to go. The invitation to a walima is wajib to accept. But the Prophet ﷺ said it's the worst food. Why did he call it the worst food? It's wasteful. Waste. Only the rich eat from it. He said the poor don't have a right. So a sunnah from the walima is to invite the poor to the walima. When you're doing your table, have a portion where you invite those who are not financially able. And the leftover food, people like, person, they said that the wedding cake, they freeze it. And their family tradition is 1 year later, on the anniversary, they defrost the cake and eat it. What? That's disgusting. Really? You guys have all heard of this before? None of the men have. They just get married, and the girl says, "Okay, we're gonna freeze our cake." Oh no.
Not me.
The cake lasts longer than the marriage. Really? That's common?
Like those videos online, it's funny. Like the 10-year-old.
10-year-old?
I saw a video.
That's older than you. The cake. Ya Rab. That's ajib. Wallah. That's ajib. You just have a cake in there, eating it for every single year. It's kind of weird thing is that. Anyway. The Sahaba, they were, and whenever the Sahaba were hungry, another quality that they had was that they would go to the Prophet ﷺ to get food. And there's this famous hadith where a person comes to the house of the Prophet, to the masjid of the Prophet, and it was beautiful. It was because everything gravitated around the masjid. So you'd finish salah, and the Prophet would be at the musalla, and you'd approach him and say that, Ya Rasulullah, man, I don't have anything to eat or drink. So the Prophet was like, all right, no problem. He sends a message to each of his wives' homes. The first thing is charity at home. What can I do? How can I give back? Every wife says, Ya Rasulullah, it's clean at home. We have nothing. And the wives were very generous. People would just show up to the homes and knock on the door. Aisha radiallahu anha one day is at home and someone knocks, and there's and she's got a goat. So she gives a portion of the goat away. And then another knock comes. She gives another portion away. Another knock comes, another portion. And then she's got a shoulder left. And she knows the Prophet ﷺ likes this. He liked the front shoulder of a goat, right? In one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ tells, I think it was Jabir radiallahu anhu, he's like, hand me the shoulder. So he hands it. And he says, hand me a shoulder. So he hands another one. And he says, hand me a shoulder. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, goat only has 2 shoulders. And the Prophet ﷺ said, had you not talked back to me, you would have given me shoulders in the day of judgment. Talking back can take away the barakah. Can take away the barakah. Prophetic barakah. Anyway, so when Rasulullah ﷺ comes home, he asks Aisha radiallahu anha, ma baqiya, what remains? She says, Ya Rasulullah, there's a shoulder that remains for you. And I gave off the rest of the goat. And he's like, no, the rest of the goat remains. And the shoulder didn't remain. Meaning that the rest of it, I will enjoy the charity of it for eternity, for a lesson. You can buy a meal, and we should do this, right? We should take someone out to eat, someone random in the masjid. If you can't, another thing about our culture is we'll take them to restaurants. And restaurant foods just lack barakah. And I'll tell you why. A person cooking food with wudu, dhikr, and love for the guest is going to have far more barakah than the one who is cooking food as a chore and just because they have to. Or a person who doesn't have iman in their heart. And I can count the amount of days in a year I will eat at a non-Muslim establishment. I, first of all, don't feel the need to do so. There's so many Muslim businesses out here. And now, because my nephew's nut allergy, I don't even like going to different restaurants outside. And I just learned to just cook on my own. It's very therapeutic. And people will come and say, oh, either out of respect they say it, or they say because they actually mean it. Oh, this tastes good. I didn't do anything. I made some pasta for the Hajis the other day. And I met a brother. He said, I never eat this stuff. He said, but I heard you made it, so I ate it. I ate an extra one. No, there's so many people coming in complimenting. I didn't have the time to tell them that actually when I was putting the Italian seasoning in, there's 2 spouts. One with the small downs and one with the big part. Half of it got dumped inside. And it was early morning, I was tired, and I was like, man, I'm not gonna now put it back inside. I said, I'll just mix it a little more. I said, let's put it in. But I learned this from my teacher, Mufti Rada. Mufti Rada, he, every week, every day, he gets the same food that the students eat. And every Sunday, he has Majlis in the morning. Before Majlis, he feeds like 70, 80, 90 people. And he makes the food himself at the Hajj time. So what he does is that the whole week's menu, he mixes it, right? Which seems very simple, but according to him, it's a science. Like, because one day something happened, and like, I think he couldn't, or he didn't have the time, he got really upset. And I was like, just mix it. And he's like, no, these curries don't go together. So I has to go with this. I'm like, all right, whatever, right? So once we were in China, and we were just, when you're with your teacher traveling, you get certain formality. And we're sitting there, and I told Mufti Sahib, I was like, there's two things about you that I can never adopt. One of them is how you like just take the long-lasting thing of the food and just mix it all together. I was like, I once went to his house to eat food, and whenever he would have nice food when I was a student, he'd invite me over. Someone made fish. The fish was good. It was swimming in oil. So I ate some of the fish, and there was some of the masala. So then he told me, he was like, finish it off. So I took the little piece and I ate it. And it's just straight up oil, bro, like straight up. And he grabs that plate and he put some rice inside of it. And there were some samosas left on the table. He broke them up and threw them inside too. There was some yogurt from God knows when. He grabbed that and put it inside too. He starts mixing it, and I'm like, look at his humility. Like, he's not letting any food go to waste. He's just mixing it all. And once he's done mixing, he says, Wasim Khan, eat. So then I had to eat that food. So anyway, so I was telling him, I was like, that one thing you do, he's like, I really don't, like, I can't gravitate towards it. And Mufti Allah was like the Grand Mufti of South Africa, and he's like really like, around him you see like very senior scholars, giants of knowledge sitting around him. This is a man that's like, he's been teaching for over 50 years, 55 years, right? And he's sitting down there and he starts cracking up. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, man, one time, he's like, there's this like stomach, if you have a stomach problem, medicine. He's like, that someone brought. He's like, and as they were cleaning my house, they told me, they were like, hey, this medicine expired. And I was like, yeah, there's no such thing as expired, right? It doesn't exist, right? And then he's like, and then like they tried to throw it away, and I was like, here, don't throw it away, leave it there. He's like, there's a little bit left in it, right? I don't want to waste it. I was like, okay. He's like, yeah. He's like, so then like one Sunday I was just cooking food, and I was like, there's just a little bit left. It's medicine. He's like, so I just like, put it inside, and he's just cracking up, and I was like, what happened after? She's like, no one had a stomach problem after eating it. So, but anyway, so the Sahaba have this culture of going to the Prophet ﷺ if they need something. So one Sahabi comes and the Prophet ﷺ goes to all of his wives and they don't have any food at home. And there's another Sahabi sitting and he goes like, Ya Rasulullah, I'll take him home. For most of us, you need to call the wife. You tell her, yeah, I'm bringing a guest home. She said, yeah, you and the guest can stay outside. Right? You go to your parents and you just come inside the house with guests, you're going to get in trouble. In our house culture, we grew up with guests. And my father would, this is like back in the day in Jeddah, my father would call my mother from Mecca, and the distance is an hour and a half to 2 hours. And he'd be like, I'm coming with like 15 guests, 10 guests from the house. And that's it. And not once ever was she like that, oh my God, you're bringing guests or something. It was never a case. Down to, the other women folk in our homes, it's just, you're coming, okay, we have 5 people coming, there's 10 people coming, there's half an hour, whatever's in the house is presented. Ma hadar hudud. You don't always have to make a feast. Just put whatever's on the table. You have some chips or cookie, whatever it is, give something. This is the adab and the etiquettes that we learn, the prophetic style. Stop taking people to just restaurants. Stop going out with your friends. You want to have a time with your friends. You're going out over there and you're going over there. Go, bring them home. Bring them. There's a barakah in the house. The guest brings barakah, and they leave with the sins of the house. So the Sahabi says, without consulting his wife, yeah, so I'll take the guest. gets home. And he's like, hey, I got a guest, we have food. And she's like, enough for one person, barely. And she's like, the kids haven't eaten. And we haven't eaten. Now, I mean, look at this woman. The women were built different. Their priorities were different. She says, I got a plan. I'll delay the kids and put them to sleep. And they'll think I'm cooking something. And before I bring the food out, I'll act like I'm fixing the candle. And I'll extinguish it. And you act like you're eating. Imagine that woman hearing the cries of her kid, go to sleep hungry, to feed a man whose name she has no idea, never met, no family. It's not her mother-in-law, father-in-law, brother-in-law, so no relationship. Imagine the heart of that woman duping her kids to fall asleep hungry. The patience that she's doing, and then we hear about the story of how she extinguished the candle. This isn't a light switch. This isn't a Philips Smart thing you just tap. This is her pressing the fire, the hot wick, and the candle with her bare hands. All for what? She could have been like, just tell the guests we have a little bit, take a bite, and everybody's hungry in the city, everybody's hungry. No. This was the guests must eat till they're full. She brings the dish and the guest begins to eat. And the husband is acting like he's eating. Doesn't say a word, guest goes to sleep. The next day, the husband comes inside the masjid, the Prophet is beaming and smiling. And he says, Allah told me what you did last night. Allah told me what you did last night. That whole story is a woman's generosity. But you have to really put yourself in her shoes, in her home, in her mindset, in her mentality of the different sacrifices she did to present that one plate. Similar incident happens with Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Jabir ibn Abdullah, he sacrifices one goat. In the Battle of Khaybar, the Battle of the Trench in Khandaq, they had very little food. Bilal radiallahu anhu used to hide bread in his armpit. And he used to then, that's all they had, this much. And that's all they'd be able to conceal and then feed. And the Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu comes to the Prophet and he says, Ya Rasulullah, we have food enough for about 5-10 people. I know you and 5-10 Sahaba come. Khaybar, you hear the stories of the Sahaba being so hungry that a stone was attached to their stomach. And the Prophet ﷺ had 2 stones. This is the scenario. In this scenario, Jabir has one goat for 5-10 people. And there's 1,000 in Khaybar. And he goes and he tells the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet doesn't go like, yes, says Jazakallah khair. How the Shaykh now? The Shaykh, after we go somewhere for a lecture or speech. Shaykh, afterwards we have a dinner. And mashallah, they'll go out and about. And what about everybody else? Morna Sayyid Ahmad Khan Sahib rahmatullahi alayhi. He was incredible about this. Whenever he would travel in places and people will invite him over, he would never accept an invite. He would say, all of you guys bring the food to the masjid. For 2 reasons. Number 1, so others can eat too. And the second was, he'd have 10 people inviting him. He'd only accept 1 person. And the third reason was, he was like, Barakah won't come in your house just because a sheikh entered it. He said, even if Jibreel alayhi salam came in your house, there won't be barakah in it unless you stop doing the sins you're doing and start doing the actions you're commanded to do. Anyhow, so Jabir goes and tells the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, we got enough food for 5-10 heads, pull up. And the Prophet ﷺ gets on the hill and he says, Ya Ahla Khaybar, parties at Jabir's. 1,000 hungry people who got stones on their stomach start releasing those stones like, yo, we want to eat. Imagine, when sometimes you have 2, 3, 4 people and you think the food's getting a little less, how frantic you become at home. My God, what are we going to do? Food is becoming less. We freak out. Jabir knows that, hey, no way food's going to survive. He's like, half of them aren't even going to see the food. You have 100 people. They're going to be standing outside. Imagine dealing with that many guests. You ever go to a restaurant in Ramadan over here where the buffet finishes? And see how, mashallah, the ummah responds. Give me the brisket. Are you going to, like, what? Jabir starts walking in front of the Prophet faster. By the way, the etiquette is if you invite someone to your house, walk in front of them. Even if they're a senior person. Especially if they've never been to your house before. Otherwise, where are they going to go? That's what the Sahaba did. Like Anas radiallahu anhu, Jabir, they walked in front of the Prophet. You know how many times people like, you walk in front? Like, where? We're going to end up in the laundry room. like what is it? In the bathroom. Where's the bathroom? In one of those doors. Now I have to decide, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Which one is going to be the bathroom? Ya Rab, you go in front so that you go and you highlight. Jabir, the Prophet says, Jabir, just wait. He's like, until I don't get there, he says, don't uncover the pot. Jabir's like, all right, bet. He gets home, tells his wife, he's like, yeah, remember you told me about the Prophet? She's like, yeah, did he accept? He's like, oh, well, he definitely accepted. He also invited the whole ummah. And she's like, did you tell him that we only had like food for 5 and 10 people? He's like, yeah, of course I did. And she's like, and the Prophet knew this? He's like, yeah. And she's like, then he knows wisdom. Isn't the women were built different? Tawakkul, oh yeah. You told him the scenario, right? You didn't forget that. He's like, of course I didn't forget that. She's like, and you go to shopping. Your wife tells you, go bring me the milk. And you bring like everything else, and you're like, that's not one thing. One of my teachers, Morna Choksi, he mentioned this. He was like, he went, right, and these guys didn't have phones, right? Or didn't really use phones. So he was like, my wife told me to go bring like something from the grocery store. He's like, so I went to the grocery store. He's like, for the life of me, I couldn't remember. And remember, this is the guy who studied 9 years without a pen. He couldn't afford it, and he committed everything to memory. So he's got like a photographic memory. When it comes to the wife, she has the photographic memory, and your memory becomes nothing. As he talks about his smiling there, right? They remember better than you can ever remember. So now, my teacher's, he's like, and he's in the store, and it's a student store. So he's like, man, I have to buy something for the house. I can't remember for the life of me. So he's like, shit. He's like, is it this? He's looking, he's like, no. So, but I need this too. So he grabs this, buys this. And he's going around the whole store. He's got a whole full cart now. But he can't remember that one thing his wife wanted him to get. And as he's leaving, he turns to his student and Wanchos, he says, this is how we live in the dunya. That we came to get one thing, and we end up getting everything from the one thing we came to get. The one thing that we came to do. The one task that we had to do, we don't end up doing it, and we do everything else from that task. He's a very reflective person. So the Prophet ﷺ gets there, he opens up the cover, he makes dua, and he blows in it. And then that food suffices 1,000 people, right? 10 people at a time, they eat from one side. I'm going to tell you 2 more stories. I know time is finishing, but I enjoy both of these stories, so I want to share them with you. And they both deal with milk. Ibrahim alayhi salam would never eat alone. If there was nobody to feed, he would fast that day. He'd always have somebody to eat with him. And a lot of times, ma hadar hudur in Arabic means whatever is present, give it. And a lot of times, they would just invite people for milk. You and I, that's jai. Jai se cha hoti hai, aane jaane ki raat. Right? Jai, people come and go. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, one day, he's like sitting on the street. He's so hungry, like people thought he would have epilepsy. That's how much like he had no nutrition in his body. And he's like, I stood on the street like acting like I have a question. But I was super hungry. So he's like, I went to Abu Bakr of the alarm, and Abu Bakr crossed by and I was like, I got this question. And Abu Bakr, probably he had nothing as well, so he was just, answered the poor guy's question, just kept on walking. And he's like, that guy didn't give me anything. So then Umar of the alarm came. And Mr. Armad, he's like, I got a question. And I was like, yeah, I got you, bro. He asked an Islamic question, he answers it, and he's hoping, like, Omar's like, let's come and eat afterwards. But Omar sees me, he just keeps on walking. Abu Hurairah was so hungry that he would actually have epileptic shocks, and people would put their foot on his neck Because back in the day when people would be having epileptic shocks, they thought that the cure for that is to put the foot on someone's neck to kind of stabilize them. I guess it might have worked, I don't know. But people would put their foot on his neck being like, oh, this guy's having like a spasm. So nobody gives Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu food. The Prophet comes out and the Prophet looks at it, the Prophet smiles. He's like, I got a question. I was like, you're hungry, aren't you? And he's like, yeah. The Prophet brings a cup of milk. Bro, this is not even cereal, it's just the milk. Like, Allah has given us so much. It's just the milk. So he brings the milk and the Prophet starts to bush Abu Hurairah. And Abu Hurairah's like, yo, alhamdulillah, right? Like they're happy. Imagine we went to someone's house and they just brought us one cup of milk. We'd be like, oh, these guys stingy as hell. So now, the Prophet in the masjid of the Prophet there'd be over 70 Sahaba that have been homeless and have no food or anything. And they would just be sleeping at the masjid. 70 Sahaba. They're called the people of Sufa. And they had a home there. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he calls out and he says, Abu Hurairah, I know you're hungry, but all the people of Sufa are probably hungry. He's like, let's go feed them. Now Abu Hurairah knows because the rule is, when does the host eat? Last. Not what you and I do, dish it out before. Put it to the side. The etiquette is the host eats last. The food isn't there, alhamdulillah, it's no problem. Abu Hurairah was like, all right, cool. Like, probably gonna be barakah in this milk, right? He's like, Abu Hurairah was like, all right. He's like, Ya Rasulullah. He's like, the Prophet said, everyone in Sufa is gonna get this milk. And the Prophet says, Abu Hurairah served him. And he's like, that's when I was like, dang, I'm gonna get it last, and there's gonna be nothing left. There's 70 people here. So now he starts, and that's why the students know that whenever we're having food or something here, very seldom, until everything is served, I won't sit and eat because of this hadith of the Prophet says. Right? So Hurairah says, then I began giving everybody milk. He's like, when everyone drank, I feel like there was more milk left in the bowl. And the Prophet said, Abu Hurairah, drink. I said, yeah, absolutely, you drink. Like, I mean, you gotta respect the Sahabi. Man's having spasms on the street, gives everyone milk, but still wants the Prophet to drink for himself. And then you gotta love the Prophet for being like, no, by the way, you drink. You have it. And so he gives him the milk. And Hurairah says, I drank so much. He said that I could drink no more. And the Prophet began laughing. And there's one more story I want to mention to you guys. There's a Sahabi by the name of Miqdad ibn Aswad. He was like, man, me and two Sahaba came to the Prophet وَقَدْ ذَهَبَتْ أَبْصَارُنَا وَأَسْمَعُنَا. Like, we were so hungry that we could no longer see straight or even hear straight. Like, we were like disoriented. So we went to the Prophet. We were like, yo, so we got no home, we got no food, no drink. Do you have anything? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had 3 goats. And they were kind of grazing by the masjid. They were Prophet's goats. So he tells the women folk, he's like, give me 3 cups of milk, or there were 4, I think. Or I think there was 2 Sahaba and the Prophet. Anyway, there was a certain amount of goats. And there was milk that was brought. The Prophet gives it to them, and then he drank 1 cup. So for how many were the 3 or 4 goats that were there? He would give them the milk, and then he would drink. The Prophet I think there was 2 Sahaba, and the Prophet was there. And he would drink his milk. First give it to them, he would drink. And the Prophet's milk, he'd keep it to the side. He wouldn't drink it that day. He'd let it cool. Because have you ever had milk straight out of the udders? It's hot. Oh, it's really hot. It's like, it's heated. I've had milk from a camel. And when they're milking the camels, if you ask them like how much it gives you, they won't tell you. You know why they won't tell you how much the animal milk the animal gives? Huh? No, not really random, but Nazar. So like when we went there, we asked them, they didn't tell us, and the guy tells us, he's like, he's not telling you because he doesn't want Nazar. I'm like, what's the first nazar I'm doing of a camel getting milk? I won't get a chance for a second nazar. But anyway, the Prophet ﷺ would have that milk later, it would cool down, and he'd have the Prophet was very habitual. So he would enter the masjid, فَيُسَلِّمُ لَا يُوقَضْ بِهِ النَّائِمِ. He would say, Salamu alaikum, but not like, some people come inside the masjid, they're very disruptive. Salamu alaikum. Like, Ya Allah. We have to respond to everybody's salam that walks in. Either come early and give salam like a normal person, don't disrupt the lecture, the khutbah, this, all of that. That's not what your salam is for. The Prophet ﷺ's salam would be so gentle that a sleeping person wouldn't wake up. But if a waking person would hear it, right? So that's how your salam should be. When you enter a masjid, don't bellow a salam. There's certain times salam is makruh. One of them is someone's reading Quran, someone's doing wudu. Assalamu alaikum. Is he going to be doing this gargling his mouth or saying Assalamu alaikum salam to you? Right? Someone's in the toilet. Assalamu alaikum shaykh. Yeah, no. Let me concentrate. Right? There's etiquettes for salam. There's certain place eating. Someone's eating food. Assalamu alaikum. How many times we're eating food at a restaurant, someone comes and says salam. My one hand is in the chicken tikka, the other hand's on trying to find the roti, and now you're coming and saying salam alaikum. Right? There's etiquettes and places of saying salam. So anyway, so Miqdad bin Aswad says he'd leave his milk, and later on at night time, he said, the Prophet ﷺ would come in the masjid, drink his milk, and then he would do his dua and prayer. It was like one day. And there would be 3 cups. 1 cup for me, 1 cup for my friend, 1 cup for the Prophet. One day, he said, I drank 1 cup. My friend drank his cup. And he said, I was so hungry that day. And the Prophet's cup was there, so I said, he's like, so I grabbed that cup. He's like, and I chugged it down. And the moment I chugged it, my stomach began to hurt. And I was like, what did I just do? I drank the Prophet ﷺ's share. Rest of the story next week.
To be continued.
Inshallah. Bring milk next week.
Right, nice hot milk.